Hi, I'm Jonathan Louderback, and this is the Loudest Crow, my co-host.
I'm Justin Kroh, and we are here to caw through the noise. Wow, first episode.
First episode, yeah. Very strange. Hope to make this a tradition or habit
That would be
of
nice.
sorts, I should say.
I mean, like, just once a week, getting together, chilling for an hour.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Not only is it doable, I think it's just going to be very fun.
I think it's, in my psychology class, one of the things that she recommended, because she's like, oh, I want you to take therapy, and I agree. And she's like, you know what's the best type of therapy to start off with? Group therapy. And I'm not saying this is therapy, but venting is a healthy form of therapeutic exercise. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. And, I think just being able to talk with someone about whatever is very freeing. Because I almost feel like whenever you're talking to a different friend, you have to think about what topics does this person want to talk about. Like, you almost kind of mold what you say to their bidding, right?
Well, I think bidding's a little. I mean, it's fair. I think what you're saying is accurate.
Oh, very preferences.
Preferences is very fair. And is that a bad thing inherently? No, but I do agree with you. It is stifling. It's like, I think the truest friends are the people you feel like you can share anything with, but sometimes I don't think we. It's like usually the people you feel like you can share anything with. It's not necessarily that they're open and they have opposing views. It's that maybe they share similar views. You get what I mean? So it's less that, you could share anything and they would disagree, but it's like the people usually you share everything with are the people that agree with you already. Whereas I think what we're trying to accomplish here is, we have a little bit of diverse political, theological, social opinions, which is fine, and we want to talk about them and disagree and then find the middle ground.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that's pretty cool.
No, I think that's just excellent. I think people our age need to have a space to do that that's not so formal, right? Because, we're in college, right? And in college, they always encourage you, oh, this is a place where you can share your opinions and respectfully disagree.
Every single class is like, don't worry, guys. If you want to say something, stand up and say it. But then, something, is said, and you're just like, do I really want to be the one person? Well, it's like I've had a couple classes that I genuinely feel comfortable sharing in. But that's because, maybe not all, but certainly the majority of people are also doing it. But and maybe you have to be the one to break the mold. And I've done that a couple of times. But it's very, very intimidating whenever you walk into a modern class where it's just like this dead silent zone where everyone's just like looking at the teacher expectantly waiting for them to fill the void. I remember distinctly back in high school, Dr. Bob Lynch back in Glendale.
Dr. Bob Lynch.
And I remember the first day in the class, I was in the class of Elijah, and Dr. Bob had to fucking, pardon my French, he had to put the world on his shoulders like Atlas and carry the dialogue in that class for a week straight. It was the most awkward thing. Because here he is. He's joking. He likes to make jokes.
Yeah.
And he would drop one, and then would just be like...
Yeah. No, I remember the exact same thing when I took his grammar and comp class, He'd be throwing out these jokes, trying to get us to not only talk to him, but talk with each other. We all just kind of stared at him blankly. And because I was so familiar with him with academic team and whatnot, I was definitely the first to kind of break out of my shell and just interact with him and try to interact with the rest of the class. And eventually we all got there. And the awkwardness just was lifted. But for a while there, no one knew how to respond to such an open-air sort of class.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, very much so. It's like... Because it's all dependent on going into education. A lot of it's dependent on your teaching style. And unfortunately, the style of a lot of teachers, even in college, is you go in, you sit down, you shut up, you listen, and then you leave.
Yeah.
I really hope to cultivate a similar atmosphere to what Dr. Bob created. Although I do hope to have a bit more structure. I think that I loved his class. I enjoyed it thoroughly. But if there's one critique I'd have of it, is that it was open air to a fault. It was almost entirely reliant on the students to engage in discussions where they could derive value from it. I didn't feel like there was enough guidance in those discussions.
Well, and I definitely see where you're coming from. One of the reasons I liked the class so much was because it felt way more open air than anything else I had done. Simply because, as he would say often, this is supposed to be a college class. I'm going to treat you all like my college students. Mm-hmm. He literally taught this.
He teaches OTC, yeah.
Yeah. And so I actually really like that because, yes, it's kind of just like casting you into the flames. But I think a lot of high school students nowadays especially need a class like that. Where it's like, hey, look, this is going to be an environment where it's up to you to succeed. And we're going to keep this cordial, respectful, but we're also going to kind of let you be you. Because it's not up for me to drag you through this. It's up for you to go through this.
I agree with that portion. I think I am not drawing my complaint from the open structure of the assignments in the class. I think at the time I was frustrated. I felt like there wasn't enough direction. But having gotten older upon reflection, especially going into college, like his senior project, loved it. Loved doing it. Proud that I did it. I'm so glad I wrote all those pages. Really prepared me for a lot of the work I would do in college. More in the literal discussions, like literally whenever you're in class, you're sitting down, you're discussing, it oftentimes felt like he was attempting a Socratic dialogue. But a Socratic dialogue is only Socratic whenever the teacher knows what he's trying to teach and is asking repeated, pointed questions to have you come to the... You have to come to the conclusion on your own, but you're still guided. You know, whereas he'd be like, what's up with this? And then the students would be like, we haven't been taught that.
And now that you mention that, I'm reminded of a professor that I had last semester over at Drury. Dr. Vaglis, love him to death.
What
Such
class?
a great teacher. Philosophy, intro to philosophy. And I love him, but in almost every lecture, he'd bring up some kind of historical point of fact. Or to be like, okay, so Socrates was talking about this 2,000 years ago, but actually, it reminds me of this thing that was going on in like the 1800s or 1900s. What was it? And everyone would just kind of stare at him.
Yeah, it's not a history class, man. We're freshmen.
And he kind of probe at us and try to get us to eventually get there, but we would almost never would. And he eventually be like, okay, so what I'm talking about is like World War One or something like that. And there's this general or this soldier. Like he would ask questions, but he would ask questions almost out of nowhere without the right
and they're
context.
too vague. You know, I recently learned about something, because going into education, I think that I hope to be the best possible educator I can be. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people who do go into education go into either because they love their subject, and they're not maybe the best teachers, or they go into because they love the benefits of being a teacher, and same problem. I really want to go into teaching to be the best possible educator I can be. And there's a lot of techniques that you are taught valuable stuff in education classes, and being taught these things, I'm like a flummox because I'm sitting back and I'm learning about these concepts even in the early stages, being I'm a sophomore, and I'm like, where was this? Like, I'm sitting in the same classes that a lot of my teachers took because they're all education majors of some variety, and yet I'm still not seeing those techniques used. One of them is called Bloom's taxonomy, and I forgive my pronunciation. And forgive my butchering of the concept, it's been a while since I've seen the actual layout. But it's basically like a pyramid of understanding, right? First you ask to recall. That's like your classic test question. What date did this happen? Then I believe it's... I'm going to get the order all mixed up, but then there's like analyze, then there's create, which is the very tip.
Oh, yeah.
It's just different ways of utilizing the same information, and in a guided discussion in a classroom, there are ways that you could prompt this sort of thinking. So of course you have to give a lecture. Of course you have to have them watch a video to have them get that basic information in their brain. But then you have to like guide them to play with it in the right way, so where they derive value on it on their own. It's very fascinating and it sounds incredibly difficult.
Well, and what's so weird is I think some of my elementary school teachers like went over that with us. It might have been at Wings actually.
I can see that.
Specifically that gift education program, which I actually really like. I think that needs to happen more in classrooms where teachers give students like a look behind the scenes, where it's like, hey, here is
why I'm doing what I'm
doing, and here's how I hope to do it. Because that would be just to me so nice as a younger child, maybe 8th grade, 9th grade, just start seeing, oh, this is how I'm being taught. This is what I'm supposed to get out of it, and that may have motivated me a bit more to try and play with this stuff.
It's an argument as old as time. Why am I taking algebra in high school? I mean, you have so many kids in middle school and high school who don't necessarily know what they want to do. Maybe they're going to go down the college track, but because they're supposed to. And many who, have early failures in math, because it is by far, especially in elementary school, the most difficult subject. And they develop that identity, an entire topic on its own, of being bad at math. And it's like, why do I need to take this class I'll never need in my real life? There is tangible benefits to studying algebra, to studying trigonometry, even outside of utilizing them. But we're not told them.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sure there would be so many kids, me included.
Nice.
Like, upon reflection, I'm happy I took those classes, but at the time I was pissed. I'm like, why are you making me do this?
Yeah. No, even me. Like, I love math. And I was taking Calc 2 last semester, and I was learning about, like, integration by parts, and partial fraction decomposition, and all these things. And even though I enjoyed doing it, I enjoyed the process of arriving at the answer, I had to ask myself, why? Why am I arriving at these answers? And my professor, I love him. we call him Math Jesus because he's just an immaculate man.
Does he look like Jesus? Does he have like the
He
full
does,
beard
yes.
and the hair?
He has, and he's so great. He's also a musician. One of the coolest professors I've ever known.
Sounds like a Dre professor for sure, yeah.
Yeah. And what's funny is I actually had him as a teacher back in 8th grade. He was a substitute teacher for my 8th grade Algebra 2 class.
That's really fascinating.
And so meeting back up with him, I was like, whoa!
I'm probably going to have that experience too. Past point, but going into subbing as young as I am. And then, yeah. But anyway,
Yeah, so we were learning these things. And while I was happy learning them and learning how to do these operations and whatnot, I kept asking myself, why? Why are we learning how to do this? Where can this be used? And I think the thing about a lot of math classes is it's not about where specifically am I going to use this. It's about having it in your toolbox.
Oh, 100%.
So that kind of naturally, when stuff like that comes up, you're going to know how to work through it. And especially with computer science and mathematics are like family members, essentially. They're like brother and sister, which is why I'm dual majoring in those two. And already when I look at, like, say, graphics on computers when you're making a game or some kind of animation, like, volumetric lighting is calculated with, like, vectors and whatnot, with ray casting and whatnot. And so I see all that, and I'm like, whoa.
That's
cool.
actually, I know that. I know what that is. It's not just arcane mumbo-jumbo. So
when I see stuff like that, I'm like, okay. There's this stuff that is used in things that I interact with almost every day. And the stuff behind it uses this math. And I wouldn't have expected that at face value, but that's what I think, like, the later level math classes don't need to do. They don't need to tell you exactly how you're going to use it. Because I think the class that will tell you that will be some other class, like an engineering class or a computer science class.
Yeah.
But definitely for algebra, I think there need to be, like, a lot of the time when you see a curriculum in algebra, you just have these questions that are like, oh, these are real world examples. And it's just little Timothy buying 513 watermelons, right?
I love those memes where it's like, it's a guy from the math question, and it shows like a guy ordering like 2,000 pizzas or something like that. It's just like, I finally found him after all this time. And that's actually kind of bridging into almost my philosophical discussion that I kind of want to bring up. Something I have been thinking about is like going into education. It's like, we live in a world now where in our fingertips, we have access to the largest database known to mankind. Larger than any library, larger than anything. So really, any simplistic question, even of a math variety, is trivial for our computers in our hands to do.
Yeah.
And so it kind of begs the question, what is the value of a modern education? Like, it used to be that even whenever we were growing up, that math sense is what because my mom in kindergarten, she kind of teaches that very basic stuff. It's like they really pushed the idea that you need to be able to do these equations in your head. And, you probably have heard before, like in an earlier math class, because we were in that bridge generation, it's like, you won't have a calculator all the time. And look at the irony now, we definitely do. So to get to the point, we are living in a world where traditional knowledge, holding this traditional knowledge, tidbits of information in your head, is almost obsolete compared to being able to quickly access that information on the internet. Like, I have personally found myself many times, it's like, why would I learn that? If I like, why would I be curious about anything if I always have every piece of information ever at my fingertips? And it calls into question, like, higher education. It calls into question just the entire educational system, because it's all based around this premise, this ancient premise, effectively, of getting information into your skull. Being intelligent is often defined as having a lot of knowledge, which is having a lot of information hardwired into your brain. So what do you think? Like, that's a big open-ended question.
Yeah.
So.
No, I think, because I often thought about that myself, because in Calculus 2, there's one thing we learned called, like, the Maclaurin series expansion. And in layman's terms, you figure out how to calculate things that you shouldn't be able to do normally. So, like, take E, right? Euler's number. It goes on, has an infinite number of decimal places, as far as we know anyway, or pi. And what calculators actually do when you're calculating stuff like that, obviously the calculator can't get an exact answer.
Because it doesn't have the processing power to infinitely utilize.
Exactly. So what you do is you figure out how to kind of trick the calculator into doing lots of basic operations that spit out an approximation of what you're trying to find. Because, with integrals, a lot of it has to deal with infinitely many subdivisions in a finite area, or sometimes in an infinite area, which is even more fascinating. But what this process does is it kind of just traces the path of a function that gets closer and closer to the exact value that you're looking for. And each step along the way gets more precise. And so calculators will run this process like 20, 50, 100 times, depending on how precise.
In the blink of an eye nowadays.
In the blink of an eye nowadays, yes. And that's how you get to like the pi or the e. And so learning that was cool, but the question inevitably came up, why do we have to learn what calculators are doing if the calculator can just do it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
But then you have to ask yourself, well, who's making these calculators? Who's trying to make them more efficient? Like, who are the people supplying us with all this information at our fingertips?
Yeah.
Who are the ones writing about it? And so I think what it comes down to is, well, yes, we can access all this stuff in the blink of an eye if we want. To share it with others, you have to know it, and you have to play with it, and you have to explore it. You have to have it in your mind hardwired to the extent that you can share it with others in a very not just you can share it with others, but you can share it with others in a legible and understandable way.
I definitely grappled with that recently. I'm a big history guy. That's my educational major essentially, and I have found recently that I have the basics of a lot of historical concepts in my head, but whenever I go to share them, sometimes I lack the details necessary, or I lack that true understanding necessary to say it easily. And there's a difference. And something I also wanted to say, building off that point of who makes the calculators, I think that we live, our generation in particular, and every generation after us, lives in this very interesting place where we are very good at the higher level function. Like, we are incredibly good at the higher level function of what our society has produced. Like, iPad kids and we, like, we're really good at interfacing with technology.
Yes.
Way better inherently than anyone before us is. Like, we just come across it naturally. It's like, what's wrong with my computer? I know not how to solve it, know how to figure out how to solve it. But there is this entire base of centuries, millennia of human experience that built up to this point, and these all finite little things. It's like something I was like, and I'm not a big apocalypse head, so this is just a theoretical scenario to me more than anything. But if the apocalypse was to happen, if the internet was to be fried, and we weren't to have anything, it's like most of us would be fucked. Yeah. Right? Because there's so much that goes into building us up that we don't even comprehend. It's like, how would you mine the rare earth minerals to then refine them, to then put them into a phone, right? Or even to like run the electric grid. I guess it's like a question of specialization. It's like our society has become so specialized that you are expected to specialize in one hyper-focused area to be the most productive that you can be. But in reality, every field is infinitely large in many different directions and has connections to many other fields.
I really love the way you put that. It ties right into programming, right? So I have this game up on Steam that I made in a very bad and shoddy way. But the reason why it's not made the best is because I was only interfacing with high level stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because in computer science, I'm taking a data structures class this semester, and we're talking about, okay, so you got yourself the development environment where you actually are typing the code. Then you have to have an interpreter reading the code.
But the developer environment, and I'll let you finish, is already higher level.
Yes. And so then you have the interpreter reading the code, and then you have the code for the interpreter, which is usually written in like C or something. And then it kind of keeps working its way down until eventually you get to the ones and zeros.
Because everything's built on binary.
Exactly. And so if suddenly we developed a completely new age of computer science, we'd have to go all the way back down to the ones and zeros. Or the 1s, 0s, and 2s, or the alphas and the betas, or whatever we decide to do if we reinvent computer science.
On and off.
Yeah. And so you're definitely right in that specialization over time. We focus on these higher and higher level things that are not necessarily all we need to understand, but we can get by only understanding.
Effectively, they're all we need to understand. To function in society, you don't need to know how your food is grown.
That's fair, yeah.
Right? You don't need to know how your electricity is made. You don't need to know those things. And the value that you get from knowing those things is infinitely... It's like a asymptotic function. You derive less and less value the more you know, because you'll never utilize all information. So it's more effective, maybe not more valuable inherently, but more effective as an individual to find your hyper-focused area of study. Whatever that is. Or not even a study, but just, specialization. Yeah. It's like being a young person, kind of falling back into that domain. I think a lot of people, and understandably so in our society, are really focused on finding their niche in more ways than one, right? A lot of people maybe give up on the rat race. They give up on being financially or prestigiously successful, but they do want to find their niche. It's like there are people in our society whose literal job description is to get good at video games. Talk about highest level of societal development. Like our society is so developed that there are enough people doing enough things that a certain segment of the population is not just allowed but paid to be good at video games.
Yeah.
Right? Because
there are people who are paid to design coffee cups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they don't really necessarily worry about the ceramics, or they don't worry about how the materials are gathered, and they don't have to.
Because that's someone else's job.
Yeah, kind of esoteric, but it's kind of there, and it's like going into the future. It's only going to get crazier, in a sense, because I think I personally feel a sense of ease with the way I work, with knowing things. Once I know something, I feel comfortable. I feel like, okay, I know that thing. I can put it aside. I don't have to worry about it anymore. But we live in a world where it's literally impossible to know all the things.
Yes.
And
that reminds us of our conversation about your grandmother. But while some people would be almost defeated by that notion, I would say it's infinitely exciting.
It's not bad. But it is, like, in a certain... Whenever you're... Like, I'm discussing it like I am right now, it is incredibly fascinating that... It feels fragile. Does it make any sense?
Yeah, because, say 99% of the population is wiped out. There are going to be a lot of gaps that need to be filled. Mm-hmm. A ton of gaps, because our insurmountable amount of knowledge that we have right now only exists because we have so many people to take up certain roles and take up certain portions of that collective knowledge.
It's like you wouldn't expect a farmer to know how to code, but that's because they don't have to. But at the same time, it's like something I watched. This is like a TikTok I saw a while ago, and it just popped in my mind. It's like a lot of people have you heard about the return to, not like primitivism trend, people are trying to live off grid.
Yeah.
It's like you really can't live off grid, because to live off grid, a lot of people have to purchase things from the grid. You know what I mean? Like they have to buy solar panels. You don't know how to make solar panels. You don't know how to fix solar panels. A lot of people, I'm going to start growing my own food. My mom is a gardener, and she has only moderately successful gardens because she's been doing it for the past 25 years. Right? Farming is hard.
Farming is hard. Yeah. And that actually reminds me, one thing I think that's very interesting is that now in this age of computer science and technology and robotics specifically, we're going to get to this point where we don't even have people that are filling in these gaps. We're going to have technology. And so more and more of us are going to specialize in the robots. Take farming, for example. We're going to have, I imagine almost like a Roomba that goes out and
waters the plants.
Picks them, and weeds them out. And so I think it's just going to be so fascinating to see how that shift occurs. And if anything, that'll make it more fragile. Because what happens if
people will forget stuff? People will forget stuff.
People will forget
It's like WALL-E.
Yeah.
It's like WALL-E, dude.
Dude, yeah, Pixar called it out very early.
I mean, obviously WALL-E is like a rough... it's not precisely what it would be, but it's kind of similar, It's like we're developing a society wherein humans no longer need to perform the basic functions to keep society going.
Yeah.
Which is awesome, but terrifying.
It is kind of terrifying to think we are now putting a lot of our vital functions into something non-human. But I also think that as long as we do it right, as long as we put in safeguards to make sure we'll be okay if something goes wrong here or there, as long as we are careful about it, I'm not exactly afraid.
I'm not necessarily afraid of getting those tasks out of human hands, because obviously humans can make mistakes. That's only human. More like the idea that one day, just an extreme example, one day no human knows how to farm. Perhaps there'll be books of it, but the idea that one day in human society, is in the future, no human knows how to farm or to mine or to chop down trees. And some of those skills aren't so hard as to be not relearnable, but the idea that it's just out of the human consciousness is kind of scary to me.
Honestly, yeah. It is a little scary. I don't think we'll ever reach that point, though, simply because, if we have robots doing these things, we'll start specializing in repairing those robots and understanding how they function. And so, kind of vicariously, we'll learn how to farm by operating on farming robots.
That's fair. Yeah.
So, I don't think we'll ever quite get there. But then what happens if we start having robots operating on robots? Or robots operating on operating robots operating on robots?
That's what's critical mass, it feels.
Yeah.
I've always heard that. I'm not personally afraid of robots or AI or anything. I think that, a lot of that fear of that is kind of reactionary in nature. I think people are afraid of change inherently, but I will say I will raise an eyebrow whenever the first robot builds another robot. I will be like, okay, so I don't think anything's gonna happen, but if Skynet's gonna happen, it's gonna happen now.
It's like, Grey Goo is looking a little more plausible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah. We've been on that topic for a while. What do you want to talk about?
I think I want to talk about our week. How's your week been?
Interesting. I was just thinking about in the car drive back home from piano. It feels both incredibly long. It feels like, wow, it's already the second week of school done. And it feels like, oh my god, it's only the second week of school, like, simultaneously. You know what I mean? It's like, oh my gosh, it's going fast and slow at the same time, and I feel very confused.
I think something that just, like, made it all that worse was our snow day, right in the middle of the week.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just kind of divided it. Yeah. No, so my week's been great. We went rock climbing the other day. I really enjoyed that. Probably going to go after we're done recording this, actually. And then, I don't know, I've started writing my weekly schedule out on a whiteboard in my room. And I found it so liberating. Because I'm just like, I don't need to rely on myself to remember all this. I can just have it right here. And every morning I wake up and look at it.
I had a very similar experience. And I was like, I feel like we're discovering things. Like, obviously we're young, right? But I feel like we're discovering things that are just like set in stone, right? Like, I've started budgeting my monthly, like, rather than just like living from paycheck to paycheck, which I'm not because I'm living at home. So I'm not worried about costs. But I budgeted out my entire month. I like how much I usually make minus my costs. And I have so much discretionary money. Like, and that's why I'm living at home, right? I'm working, 17-ish hours a week, and I have to pay for gas, and that's my only cost right now. And, of course, all the maintenance and stuff that's going on with the truck. But I looked at it, because I want to travel in the future. I need to start saving money. I was worried about, will I be able to save enough money in time for that trip? And it's like, yeah. Whenever you only look at tomorrow, whenever you only look at what you have in your bank account, it's really easy to be like, I have nothing, or I have no time if you don't have your schedule right now. But having it just, it's calming.
And I'm grateful to the teachers, because not all teachers do it, but some teachers are like, okay, today I'm going to do some budgeting. Funny enough, one of the places that did this was at my church. They just decided, hey, so since you have to pay tithe and offering, we're going to help you budget so you can make sure that you're good. Which I thought was actually a really cool thing to do for young adults.
Yeah, 100%. That's really valuable.
So we just did these budgeting sheets, and I was like, dang, I'm actually pretty good in terms of money. Because I think, our age, one of the things we're most worried about is the money.
Yeah.
I remember there's an old saying, when you're young, you have energy and time but no money. When you're working, you have
money,
energy and money but no time. And then when you're old, you have time and money but no energy. So you never have all of them. And so I've kind of been bogged down by the notion, college, car insurance, hang out with friends, there's going to be a lot of money that needs to go into this. But then when I actually sit down, budget it out, and think through it, I'm like, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good. And I think that's something that kind of plagues our day and age, is they get kind of too locked up. Obviously, live in the present moment. But
yeah, but what does that mean?
What does that mean? And I think so many people hyper focus on that. They get this tunnel vision, and so they can't look to the future and see the bigger picture.
Van life. You know what I mean? That sort of stuff.
And so it kind of concerns me almost that you have so many people who are plagued by legitimate anxiety and depression. And I think a lot of that just has to do with the hyper focus on the present.
Well, I think because anxiety and depression exist. Right, and there's two types of the disorder, though. There is, you have depression, which is a disorder you can have, or you have clinical depression, and if I'm understanding it correct, clinical is more like your brain fails. It's like a genetic defect where your brain fails to produce certain hormones. Same with anxiety, where it overproduces certain things, or you react to stimuli in certain ways. Whereas people can not give themselves anxiety, but from their surroundings, get depression and anxiety. And unfortunately, I think, this is a terrible time to be a young person.
Yes.
Right? Me and you are both lucky, and, I've been angsty about staying at home from time to time, but we are lucky in the fact that we are staying at home for college.
Yes, very much so. Right? $79,000 a year.
Imagine, budgeting out and then having, because, my friend Wes is doing this right now, of course. Going to college, you have to budget out your time, you have to budget out your money because you have to pay rent, you have to pay all those things. There are a lot of people out there, our age, who are doing that, and I'll tell you right now, who are getting married and having kids. Dude, I work in the wedding business. Dude, I see people our age, younger than us, walk in And they're like, I'm like, you're gonna spend $50,000 on a wedding,
dude. So
okay, that's a pet peeve of mine. But you get what I'm saying.
I was eating at this random restaurant a few months ago. I saw one of my friends from high school walk in, carrying a couple kids, and I'm like,
do I know them?
I don't think you did. They were my grade. Their name Mateo.
I do know Mateo.
Yeah, and so I saw that, and I was like, hey Justin, how you doing? He's carrying his baby, and I'm like, doing fine.
I think I know Mateo. I remember talking to Mateo.
He's kind of big. I think he either did wrestling or football. I think he did football.
I think he did football.
Yeah.
I think I had gym with him.
Yeah, you probably did.
But he sounds familiar to me. 2 kids?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
And he's your age too. He's not my age.
Yeah, he's my age.
So he's what, 19 at most?
19 at most.
Class?
Unless he got held back and I didn't know about it. Yeah.
So
19.
that's a really fascinating subject because I think our generation, and it's been a trend in every developing country, right? But our generation is moving away from having kids young. Like, even you grew up in a fairly conservative, like, traditional family household.
Yes.
But I don't think you plan on having kids until after college, at least.
Yes, correct.
But, like...
My grandpa and my grandma on my mom's side got married at 18 and 17 respectively.
Same for mine.
And then my grandpa on my dad's side had my dad when he was 24.
And, 24 is, like, at that time, fairly, not old. It's not old for a kid, but it's older than might be expected.
Yeah.
Like, there's such a focus on, because we were talking about living in the moment. I think a lot of people, something I've noticed in our generation a lot is that people in our generation are trying to break generational trauma. It's like generational trauma is just something that happened. It's like, my dad raised me this way, so I raised my kid this way, and then that keeps going on down. And, like, a lot of our generation with the focus on mental health, with that sort of stuff, is like, why am I feeling this way? How can I stop it? And they realize, parents, I think a lot of blame gets thrown on parents that's maybe not deserved because they're humans and they're dealing with their own shit too. But at the same time, it's like, my parents did this. Maybe the solution is to me not having kids till I'm ready. And I think a lot of people are like, well, I'm never going to be ready for kids. And before you know it, you're 30.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, I don't think there's ever a point where someone's ready to have a kid until it's too late. Because just like with relationships in general, I think you're never going to be as ready as you would like to be.
Yeah.
You have to jump in.
Do you plan on having kids, I assume?
Yes. Yeah. I do plan on having kids.
But, like, do you have, like, a timeline that's, like, roughly? Like, I'm just genuinely curious.
So, I want to try and... I might get into a relationship before I graduate college, but I definitely won't get married until after college. And then late 20s, early 30s is when I'd like to have kids.
I think if you're going to have kids, that's the best time to have it.
Yeah, because I want to have a couple years to get settled in my career, get a nice cash flow going wherever I work, and then so I definitely want a couple years of marriage, just my wife and I, because I think that's a very valuable time that a lot of parents seem to kind of rush into having kids after they get married, but I think it's so much more valuable.
You need to establish your marital dynamic.
Yeah.
I think you need to let that mature. Because I know a lot of people come to work. It's like, I always ask them this question, like, especially if people are like the groomsman or like the father or something like that's getting fitted for a suit. I'll be like, so is this a surprise or a long time coming? And no, I've heard a lot of a long time coming as of late, but sometimes I'll be like, yeah, it was just like they dated for like 2 months. I'm like, oh my god, like
that shocks me.
You know what I mean? Now I understand why it happens. Because, people get older, they're focused on their careers, and they're like, oh my god, I want to have kids, we're going to get married, and then they were like, I got to do this now. What have you ever heard about antinatalism? Like, it's like a movement that's springing up as of late.
No, I've not. So
antinatalism is just, it's not just anti-having kids for themselves. There are people who believe having kids is like a moral evil. Because you're bringing kids into an evil world. Is the notion. Right?
That's so depressing.
It is a very depressing notion.
That's so depressing.
But it does, I'm not an antinatalist myself, but I do find several of their points at least compelling in the sense, like, I understand where they're coming from. It's like, there is like, with the way the news cycle works, with the way everything is, it's like, it definitely can feel sometimes like the world is collapsing around your ears.
Yeah.
It's like, just to ask you a moral philosophical question, do you think even if the world was literally coming to an end, like, would you still have your kids, and why would you? Like, what do you, like, what, is it like a duty? Is it just a desire? Like...
That's great. I've actually kind of thought about a similarly worded question before. And, honestly, yeah, I would. Because, not because, like, oh, I think the world's literally collapsing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having these kids. I wouldn't see that as me sending them to their doom. I would see that as giving the rest of the world more hope for a better, stronger generation, for us to rebound, right? And obviously, I would have to take up a lot of responsibility with that. But as your parent, I think it's your responsibility to make your child's world great, because before we were conscious and aware of like the news and all these things going on. I don't know about you, but in my childhood, I thought the world was a fantastic place, and I loved living. I loved, playing with friends and doing things. And obviously, I would get upset by.
Oh yeah, like but you weren't. It's like you weren't worried about, geopolitical stuff.
2008 recession. Knew nothing about it.
Yeah, I didn't either. I didn't know anything about it either until, and even though like I look back and I see the impacts of the recession on my life, at the time I didn't know.
Yeah, and the kids, they're born into the environment they're born into, and they don't really have any sense of If our world was collapsing, we would say that because before there was this kind of state of tranquility or calm, or at least we had more institutions than we do now, if the world was collapsing. Children, though, they can't even comprehend those institutions. All they know is their immediate world around them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as the parent, it's just your job to make sure that world is as pleasant as possible. And of course, that doesn't mean hiding the bad stuff from them, but waiting till the appropriate time to expose them to that.
I think because I really appreciate what you're saying, because I think a big element of antinatalism is there's a lot of people out there, and I've met some of them personally, who like view having kids as a matter of self-actualization, right? Self-fulfillment derived from having children. Like whether that's, duty, because I know that I'm not sure if it's actually in the Bible, but I know a lot of Christians feel like they have to put more Christians in the world.
Be fruitful and multiply.
Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah. And then, a lot of people feel like, my life sucks, but having a kid maybe it'll give me a sense of purpose to take care of them. And I think that's a dangerous line of thought.
I would agree.
I think that to be a good parent, like, of course no one's a perfect parent, but to be a good parent, at the very least, you don't need to be, because no one's, like, totally confident in who they are, but you need to have a good, solid sense of self. Right?
Very much so.
You can't derive that from your children. Because, like, I'm sure I've maybe not met, but at least, like, seen or been around. Like, there are mothers and families out there, like, mothers in particular, because the way our society has built motherhood to be, who are like, oh, my oldest kid's getting old, I want a new kid. Right? I want a new baby.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's where they derive the most meaning from their day-to-day life, which is, like, terrifying to me.
Yeah, and then there's all the empty nest stuff, right? And, no, I agree that it's concerning to see a lot of people nowadays trying. Well, and this is, I shouldn't even say nowadays. It's always happened.
It's always been the case.
Yeah, they try to put themselves in their children and be like, oh, you're going to be everything I wanted to be but couldn't be, right? Till as little as time, and
you're entirely right.
And so seeing that, it is a little sad, and like you said, it's a dangerous line of thought, because you're not only setting yourself up for disappointment. Most likely,
but you're setting your kid up like that to perpetuate that cycle of generational trauma that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, and so instead of, I think what ends up happening is you have generations of people trying to avoid being their parents, as opposed to generations of people who want to continue what their parents started, right? And that's the way I look at it. Like, my father flunked out of college, right? But he took some time. He kind of had a rebound in his faith, because he grew up in a very conservative household as well, but he fell out of it for a little bit. But he went on this missionary trip to Belgium, and his whole life was changed. So he came back to the States, and he went to college at age 35 or something. I think he actually graduated the year before I was born. So and that was after he got married and all that. But I think I love my parents' story. And then my mom, she had a good life. She grew up, went to college. She was a teacher for 10 years, and then she started working for Global University and helping people overseas learn about the Bible and study curriculum and become pastors. And then my dad joined her, and then moved here to Missouri. And so all that I see, it's them trying to better themselves no matter what stage of life that they're in. And I think parents need to do that as well, because you shouldn't, as a parent, obviously, you should focus on your children, but you also need to focus a little bit on yourself.
Oh yeah, I think it's it would be a disservice to sacrifice yourself entirely for them.
Yeah, and as opposed to just watching your kid grow up, I think you need to watch yourself grow up.
You need to grow with them.
Yes.
I think that because I've always been terrified of the concept of having a kid accidentally too early. Obviously, what's happened in my life, my sister had a kid at my age, right?
I didn't know that.
Right? I am 20, and my sister had Ryan, my nephew, at this age. Right about this time of year.
Goodness. Wow.
3 years ago. You know what I mean? And there's something that I've been reflecting upon that recently, because to me that's almost existentially terrifying. And I was like, well, why is that existentially terrifying? And, well, it's like there's this notion that you have kids, your life is over. And I think that's attached to what you're talking about, where people stop growing. They're like, okay, I guess I have a kid now, even if they're good parents, and like I have to give everything to this kid. When the reality is that your life is not over when you have a kid. You're going to spend a lot of time with them, especially early on. You're going to take care of them a lot. But you're always going to have space up here.
Yes.
You're still going to eat meals. You're still going to go to work. Your life isn't over. I think something people do is they conflate themselves with their free time more than they can. Like they're like a drone, and we all do this. But like a drone at work, and like whatever they need to do, they just do their tasks, and they're like, oh, I'm free. I'm myself again. I'm in my free time. And then whenever you're a kid, it's like no free time. So it's like, who am I? Whereas I think that you need to derive your value from yourself holistically, from everything you do, even if something you don't necessarily want to do, because otherwise I think you're gonna like eventually come to a wall where you can't get that meaning anymore.
I think that's a beautiful way of describing why I started enjoying school, because up until my freshman, maybe sophomore year of high school, I was just like this. I saw myself as me in my free time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw school as almost an entirely different person, but like a drone or something inhuman almost.
Well, it's like you go to school, you turn your brain off. But I mean, you don't turn it off, but you turn off yourself.
You turn off exactly. And so what I started doing once I got once I started going to Glendale, I started being myself no matter where I was. And not only did that really help when it came to coming to my own and maturing emotionally and socially, it helped me just be content a lot more, and find myself in things that weren't my free time.
Yeah.
And that's why I started enjoying school, because instead of seeing it as a time for me to turn myself off, I saw it as a time for me to, I shouldn't say turn myself on, but
I get what you mean though.
It's like a time for me to grow, to nurture myself.
And like you're gonna have your free time, even if it's a little bit. You're still gonna have it. You're still gonna have time to explore those parts of yourself, your hobbies, your interests. And I think something I've learned is from, oddly enough, Studio Ghibli, because you can derive lessons from anything. You can romanticize anything. And whenever you romanticize something, you see the inherent value in it. And you can, being a studious, good student is like a good thing.
It is, yeah.
You know, it's just like straight up a good thing for you. It's a good thing in general, and it's a cool part of identity to have.
Yeah.
You know?
No,
it's genuinely fun to learn. Like, whenever you actually sit in the classroom and you're trying to derive value from the teacher, even if maybe it's not expressly what you're looking for, you're just trying to derive whatever value you can. It's a very interactive and engaging experience, more than just, you know.
I think something that helped me, funny enough, get into school and really start enjoying it were those lo-fi music live streams.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Just lo-fi girls sitting down doing this music.
Well,
all
you
cozy.
You feel this like sense of like companionship, you know, with all the other people in the chat. Because the live stream, with the girl herself, and you're like, you know what, maybe this is something that people do for a reason.
Yeah, and it turns something that is often daunting into something inviting and warm and exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I've had the exact same experience with it.
So yeah, and that's great. And so thank you to Lo-Fi Girl.
Yeah.
But
thank you, Lo-Fi Girl.
But no, I love that stuff to death, and that's really, you were spot on when you said romanticizing these aspects of your life that you might not normally romanticize, because everything kind of has a silver lining to it that you enjoy. And again, tying back into full circle conversation about education, I think what really we need to start doing as teachers is romanticizing education. Not just showing, oh, here's what you're learning, here's why you're here, but show why being here is a good thing.
Yeah, I've put a lot of thought into that myself. Like, something to invite the element of romanticization is to make people understand what is truly, it's like to guide them to the spark that makes you love a thing. And that's one of the most difficult things to do, because sometimes we love things for like weird reasons. You know, it's like there are people out there who love staring at maps. I'm included. It's like, why do you like staring at maps? It's because I view geography, I view maps, I view political borders and such as stories. And I hope to express it to my history students. I want to sit them down the first day and say, we're not looking at the story. We're not looking at dates and times and names. We're looking at the stories of you. Literally the stories of people that came before who lived the exact same sensory experience that you did. And from that, those stories that we're going to learn together, we can derive value for how you can live your own life. You know, we can derive meaning and purpose. Not to not repeat the mistakes of the past, but to maybe give you guidance in your future. You know, I think that I've never heard anyone say stuff like that in my classes. I want to be that teacher. I've often thought before, it's like, why do kids love Harry Potter? They love the idea of going to a school, but not their normal school. And it's because magic. There's magic in Harry Potter. Quite literally, it's a magical school. But more than the actual literal spell casting, there is a magic that's just like in the building and the characters. There's like this magical story there, this magical essence that makes you feel a sense of wonder. And I've often thought to myself, I want to be people's Dumbledore. You know? I want to be like the teacher that you would look back upon and you're like, man, I'm using this life lesson he taught me. You know?
Yeah.
Sorry for that tirade.
That was fantastic. Oh, and I love the way you just described maps. Like, I think that's fantastic. Conveying your passions to other people in a language they can understand is really difficult. But if you could just do that with one student, I'd call that a fantastic success. Like, take math, for example. Like, I'm not looking to be a teacher, but if I were, math, when I look at math, and especially programming, I see the language of the universe and uncovering and tampering with its secrets almost.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, very much so.
Especially when you're making a game, you're literally building your own universe with rules, and that can be whatever you like. So it's like the greatest story ever told, because not only are you building your very own world, other people can experience it how they want to experience it. They can look where they want to look. They can move how they want to move. And the more freedom you give the player, the more beautiful it is. That's why I love Minecraft so much. That's why it got me into programming in the first place, because I was like, well, here's this world, and I'm using these command blocks. I'm literally modifying this world with these command blocks. And so that extended to me making just games from scratch, because it's like, wait, hold on. I don't even need Minecraft to be my base template for a world. I can just build mine from the ground up with its own rules. And I think just getting into Minecraft command block coding was a fantastic gateway into game development, because it just let me see, all I'm doing here is modifying this world with these certain rules and constraints and making my own experiences out of it. Now let's see what happens when I'm also the one building that world with those rules. And so programming, I see it's just freedom. It is freedom at the most fundamental level possible.
Yeah.
And so that's why I love it so much. And when I talk with people in my game development classes and for now it's programming, but eventually we'll get to game development. But like, I go to a game development club, and we're actually going to do a game jam next week, because the global game jam is coming up. The theme for it gets announced today, so I'm hyped about that.
Awesome.
But no, talking with those people, it's so interesting to see how clearly we're all passionate about this, and we don't even need to say why, because we already kind of know.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I'm so glad I decided to go to college. For a little while, I was anticipating, you know what? I'll just do my own thing. I'll make it work. I won't pay all that money. It'll be great. But now I'm so glad that my parents convinced me to go to college, even if I didn't need to, because it's not about do you need to go to college. It's about how much further can those people in that environment push you.
I think the biggest, like, oftentimes, something that my uncle said to me a while ago about a coffee shop really stuck with me. It's like, we walk into this coffee shop, they also had ice cream. I'm like, okay, why is this ice cream $10? And he looks at me, and he looks around at this really pleasant, brick with the slow jazz playing in the background, the nice mood lighting and the comfortable chairs. He says, you're not just paying for the ice cream, you're paying for the atmosphere that the coffee shop provides.
Reminds me of a SpongeBob episode where it's like, why is a burger $20? Because you're paying for the atmosphere.
I mean, it's true, though. It genuinely is. It's like, why do you pay, whenever you go to a really high dollar restaurant, like talking hundreds of dollars per plate, why do you pay that much for the food? You're paying for the service, you're paying for the music in the background, you're paying for the impeccable seating, you're paying for all of that, right? Because in comparison, if you want to spend $7 on a burger and eat it in your car, you can, right? But whenever you pay for that atmosphere, whenever you pay to go to college, you're paying to be surrounded by people who are pursuing the same thing as you. You know, both teachers and students, people who desire for one reason or another to learn. And I think that's too expensive, because college is not just that. It is also a pipeline by which people can pursue careers to better their lives. And since that's the case, I think it needs to be lower. But it's still the case that whenever you pay for that, like whenever you go to the library, you're surrounded by other people who are studying in the same direction as you, who are looking to do the same things. And I think that it has a really powerful impact on your psyche. You know what I mean? It's like whenever you say you're a college kid, you conjure part of your identity to be studious, to be on time to class and that sort of stuff. But if you have an identity somewhere else, then you're going to have different habits and different identity aspects of your identity that you want to include. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, totally. And that's one thing that kind of surprised me, is just how good college feels, especially compared to high school. Because high school, you feel like you're part of some kind of factory assembly line.
Yeah.
Whereas with college, you feel like you're almost in the garden being nurtured and tended to. Not just by your professors, but also by others. Almost like those forests where they have these vast networks of like underground roots, and they're all connected, and they're all helping each other grow. That's kind of how I imagine the college experience. And I don't know.
I will say, I do think that your experience is... where you're going to college, right? You're going to a small private university. And I've had a similar experience because I'm going to a small community college. But I know plenty of people who've gone to these massive, like especially during freshman year, these massive state colleges, and there's like 200-300 people in their Algebra 1 class, and they're like, what's going on? You know, like it's worth, depending on what you're looking for, I think the money you're spending to go to jury is worth it.
And I would agree. Well, and I think a big component of it is you have to do a little bit of work to make it worth it.
Yeah,
because
if you just like, if you're going to do the bare minimum and not engage with the people and not engage with the clubs, with the extracurriculars, or the professors, then it's probably not worth it to go to jury. Right? If you're
it's definitely not worth it.
If you're just looking to get your degree, you know,
just take some online courses for like at most $500.
Yeah.
But no, yeah. So I think that's a big thing that a lot of people our age come to realize, is that, you know, there's a lot more to life and a lot more to education than that studious part.
Yeah.
Because being studious does not mean, you know, isolating yourself with work. I think being studious, really what that means is you are giving yourself as many opportunities as possible by not just working hard, but working with others.
Yeah, and interfacing with your education in a meaningful way.
Yes.
Is really what we're talking about. It's taking it outside the classroom, outside of your desk, and really grappling with it. And like, that's, because like, there's a reason that some of these top universities, like, are the top universities. Like, I heard from one of my teachers who has a student that's going to Brown, who's a child that's going to Brown, which is one of the big Ivy League schools, that the first day of class, you don't register for classes. You go, there's an open week. You attend the classes you think you want to take. You try them out, and then you write them down if there's spots open.
That's really weird, but I kind of dig it.
It's good. I kind of dig it too, and it's like, it's all about that thing where it's like they're encouraging their students not just to like take it down for as a course requirement, but to take this class not just because they need it, because they like it, they like the teacher, they're interested in the subject. It invites success, you know.
Drury did a similar thing over the summer, called like Fuse Day or something, because their whole fusion program is all about fusing life with a career, right? And so we went there. It was like in June, and before we registered for classes, we fill out the survey to talk about what we liked, and then counselors would sign you up for some generic classes that fit what you put on the survey. But then you go to this Fuse Day thing, and you would go to these seminars where it wasn't like an actual class, but you still had these professors explain what their classes are like and what they cover, and not just in their specialized area either. Like, I went to a communications seminar, and I didn't have any intention of being a communications major, but the person there, Dr. Groves, he encouraged me, hey, if you're doing a game dev major, I think you'll really like philosophy as a minor. And so that's how I started taking philosophy as a minor. And I'm very thankful to him for that, because not only did I have him as a professor for a different class last semester, But I've really been enjoying the philosophy courses.
I won't lie, you're kind of selling jury to me right now.
No, jury is fantastic. It is expensive.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason I'm going there is because I had some scholarships. But if you can muster the money, or even get the right loans, like, it is really great because the size of the class, the biggest class I've ever been in, had 36 people.
Yeah.
Right, and even that class, it wasn't a super specialized class; it's a more generic one. It was actually called a Fuse class, which is essentially jury's version of grammar and comp, which is actually really fun because first semester you focus on a very niche topic that you probably wouldn't explore, but that can give you information and knowledge that will help you in your career. And then second semester you take an intersections class, which takes two topics, finds where they intersect, and then you write a lot about that and explore that. The one I'm in right now is called Sight and Sound, and it's about movie soundtracks and the psychology of those soundtracks, how the music makes you feel, what goes on in your brain.
That's awesome.
And I think it's perfect for game development, right? Because games, they're all about interacting with the experience.
I mean, we were just talking about how I feel that Toby Fox, whenever he was making Undertale, almost feels like he made his music first, and that second, because I think the biggest cultural impact from his stuff is the music.
No, I completely agree. Because when I think Undertale, the first thing that comes to mind is the soundtrack.
Yeah.
Like the characters, I think they're great too. But
the characters are epitomized. They are made by their songs.
That's true. You got your Bone Trestle, you got your Megalovania, you got your Asgore is like my favorite soundtrack.
Dude,
in the whole game.
I love Asgore's song, dude. And did you know that the little not prelude, but the opener to it,
Bergen Trucking, whatever.
Yeah, it's a whole different song, because he composed a little entry piece to his other piece, which is badass.
It is so cool. No, I love it, and so taking the Sight and Sound class, I'm just really grateful because it focuses on a core part of game development, or just crafting, even movie experiences. Like the soundtrack and what's going through your ears beyond the dialogue is so important. It can really make or break certain scenes. One example was we watched a slow motion video of water balloons falling, and we played it with different kinds of music, and it completely changed what we were perceiving when we were watching these water balloons. And same thing goes for game development. Like Enter the Backrooms, I try to make a lot of varied soundtracks, so some that are more ambient than anything else, but then there are these other grand orchestral, kind of electric sounding, big bombastic soundtracks that really try and instill certain emotions in the player. And so I'm just really fascinated by those classes.
My favorite piece of, I guess you could even say, video game musical literature is C418, the music he composed for Minecraft. Some of those songs... So I learned recently that a lot of his songs are actually composed on the pentatonic scale. And the pentatonic scale is, if on a piano, you're only playing the black notes.
Even just black notes,
there's only 5 notes on the pentatonic scale, but you're only playing the black notes. And it kind of blew my mind, because it's and I'm learning a lot about these the grand sounding pieces that are so very simple whenever you really break it down.
Yeah, like the main theme Minecraft. Yeah,
Minecraft is super super simple. And whenever you really break it down, it's even I'm learning Bach's prelude in, I believe, C major, the well-tempered clavier.
Ooh, C major. Ooh.
Yes. And it is literally the same rhythmic piece. Each measure, every measure is identical except in rhythm. The notes are different, but it's the exact same in rhythm until the last 2 measures of the song, and the song's 3 pages long.
Wow.
Right, but if you'd listen to it, especially if you didn't know that, you never would have ever thought it was a simple piece because of the emotions that it derives from you. Music is very tied to this. In my personal theory, I'm not sure if this is backed in any science. I learned from a very, very early on in an online music theory course I was taking that a note is different from percussion in the sense that percussion can be higher and lower, but you can't replicate it with the voice.
It's true.
A note is a pitch that you could replicate with a human voice. I think the reason music invokes such emotions in us is because it tricks the part of your brain that's used to hearing human voices into thinking that's humans making those noises.
Maybe.
You kind of get what I mean? Where it's whenever you hear something, you can derive emotion from these pieces, from this music, because it's your brain's that human's upset. You kind of get what I mean?
Yeah, and what was so cool is we watched this TEDx video about, it was about music and its effect on the brain, and you had this quartet playing this nice, soothing piece, and then in the front, you had a man with electrodes attached to his brain. and you could see alpha waves, you could see calm, you could see just very, very nice, normal looking things. And then they did two things. The quartet did two things. First, they started playing scary music as opposed to the calm music, and you could instantly see the waves in the brain become a lot more tense, a lot more active, a lot more. I wouldn't even say scared, but just more aware, because that nice soothing pattern is gone, and so they feel like there's some kind of threat that they need to analyze, and so you see the alpha waves turn into beta waves, and they get more intense and scraggly, and then later they played the soothing song again, and then they randomly started playing it off key, like not even a scary song. It would just go like no, like they started doing that, and it was so funny because they had like 9 different like electrodes or something showing the waves, and they started just crossing over each other and just drastically going up and down, and so because he had this nice pattern, and suddenly it was just completely disrupted. And honestly, I would say that's worse. It's worse to go from a nice pattern to something completely
dissonant,
as opposed to just being thrown into the dissonance first. Because that breaking of expectations is dangerous. And so same thing with talking to people, or the human voice in general. It's like definitely think there's something hardwired in us to reciprocate that, and feel more impact by things that sound like the human voice. The vibes. I mean, even if it's not true, even if neurologically, like,
that's proven false.
matter.
I think that there's an element of similarity there at the very least.
Yeah. And something interesting to tie this into something personal to me, like theologically, when you go to sing a song during praise and worship at my church, you literally feel almost this presence in you that's just erupting, and it's so crazy because like I can feel that similarly when I'm listening to a song I really like, but it feels amplified to 11
because
whenever
you're
I'm
surrounded by so many people.
Well, surrounded by so many people, but also like it literally feels like something is bubbling and moving inside of me, like whenever I enter this thing of praise and worship. So on a theological level, I believe, if we are hardwired that way, that's because God did that in us, not only so we could honor Him, but so we could honor each other with our voices and with music.
Music is possibly just the greatest thing humans have ever made.
Possibly, yeah. I saw this post that made me so mad the other day. Well, not so mad, but I saw it and I was like, wow, that's a really bad take.
Yeah,
and someone said, like,
trash take, yeah.
Yeah, and someone said, oh yeah, music is like the lowest form of art anyone can ever make. And I'm like,
bruh.
Bruh.
What kind of trash are you listening to is what that is.
Probably a little bit of K-pop.
Okay, listen, I used to think the same thing. Randy's really into K-pop, and there are some slappers, dude.
No.
Like, okay, you have to listen to it for a little bit, because being in a different language, it could sound like that. It tricks that part of your brain where it sounds samey. But there are some slappers.
I actually don't have anything against K-pop. I was saying it for the meme. But
fair enough. No, but like unironically, dude, there is some slapping music in K-pop. Like, there's actually a song that's like really popular right now on the radio that's done by a K-pop band. So it's just like number 1 or something. I forget what it is.
Wow. I don't listen to radio anymore. I used to all the time, right? In middle school, I had 2.5 hours of bus rides a day. 1 hour to hour and a half back. So any pop song that there was, I eventually listened to those 3 years. And I got so sick of it. Because a lot of it sounds the same. And we talked about this in my philosophy class for a little bit. And we're like, a lot of pop music, a lot of like soft rock and stuff like that. It doesn't really demonstrate a true understanding of music theory or a true understanding of music's impact on us. It kind of does it does what it needs to do to, have nice sounding chords and whatnot, but it doesn't really.
And to be catchy, to sell.
Yeah.
To make you listen to it again.
It plays with music, but it never really seems to like master
dive deep
music.
Into it. Yeah.
Dive deep into it. Yeah. I compare it to like a kid in the sandbox making a kind of cool looking sandcastle to medieval architects literally building these grand manors and stuff, right? Like, sure, you can get the basics in there and fundamentals, and it'll be aesthetically pleasing, but there's so much more you can do with this, and there's so many more places you can take this. And so that's kind of become a philosophy for me whenever I'm composing music, because I really got into that through game development.
Yeah.
But whenever I'm trying to compose music, I start off with something really simple. I'm like, how can I build on this? Can I add a little bit of dissonance to add some flavor and spice? Can I take the chord progression in this unexpected direction that still sounds good? And I love Miles Davis's quote that jazz is not about the notes you play; it's about the notes you don't play.
Yeah.
So music, I definitely think, is just this fantastic thing that is totally worth exploring, even for people who don't really want to know music theory. Just listen to more music.
You know, even a basic understanding of music theory really elevates, like, the way you appreciate other music. You know, even if you just learn what a chord is, you learn what dissonance is, you learn, like, these core central concepts, it really, like, you listen to a piece and you hear it in a new way. You know, I will say, it's turning one to...
Yeah, we've been going for just over an hour, so...
Are we actually?
Yeah, hour and 5 minutes.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Time flies when you are being awesome.
Oh, it's very slow for me. I'm not awesome, man.
I have my doubts.
It is, like, crawling by.
You know what? I know we said we would respectfully disagree, but you're a terrible person for thinking that. I know this is your house, but you need to get out.
I need to get out of my house.
I am more worthy.
I do plan on getting out of my house soon, actually. Well, not out of desire to get out of my house, but for work. So I guess I will be performing your request. Yeah, I think we're going to try and do this next Friday.
Next Friday, yeah. So yeah, we'll try to record on Fridays and upload on Saturdays.
I don't know who's going to be watching this to start with, but if any of our friends are interested in doing this with us, just give us a holler.
Yeah, and if you aren't our friend and you want to do this, just leave us a comment. Yeah,
engage in the discussion down below. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell.
No. Now that you told them that, we're probably going to get demonetized now just because you said that.
Do we plan on being monetized? How much money do you think we're going to make from this first episode, Justin?
From this first episode, you know what? I think...
We're going to go viral?
Yeah, I think we're going to go viral, specifically because we talked...
Okay, do you get demonetized if you say subscribe and hit the bell?
No, you do not.
Okay.
I was just joking around.
That would be really funny, because I've heard that a lot recently.
I think, specifically, we will go viral because of that awesome mug you have. Like, awesome. It's awesome. I love the design. Feels like something that... Yeah, that is what you need to subscribe to. You're only going to see that once a week.
That is peak humanity right there. You know, we're talking about all of the specialization it takes to craft, different things.
Yeah. But no, this was really enjoyable. Like, honestly, like, going into this, I was getting excited, but also trying to, like, almost temper my hopes.
You also, like, I could tell that when we started off, it's, like, a little nervous. It's, like, but it really is just a conversation. Yeah. And that's all we're trying to do here.
So... Very nice talking.
Why are you shaking my... So you went for my hand like this. I was like, what do I do with that? It's like... All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah.
Have a good week. I'll see you next Friday, and wish me luck. Goodbye.
Don't wish me luck. I don't need it. I don't need your pity luck.
You bastard. All right.
Did it actually stop?
I don't know. I think you did. That's okay.